Alliance High School is on the spot following the death of a Form 3 student at the school yesterday. The family of the student claims they were kept in the dark regarding the illness and were only told after he died, after that young student died, from what they are being told is tuberculosis. Joining me in studio to talk a little bit about that, let me introduce both my guests. Starting from the far right, we have Amos Kaburu, an education expert with Twaweza East Africa. And right here next to me is Janet Muthoni-Ouko, CEC Education, Nairobi. I want to give each of you 30 seconds to react to that story. Amos, let me start with you.
Thanks, Wahiga. First of all, my sincere condolences to the family of the young man. Each of us as parents, when we send our children to school, we have high expectations and high hopes that we'll get back our children when they are safe and sound. It's quite unfortunate that the parents will be receiving a corpse instead of receiving a young man who has completed his education. Sincere condolences.
Okay, and Janet, for you?
Yeah, right there. Yeah, of course, sincere condolences to not only the parents, but the fraternity of Alliance at large, and all parents, because I'm sure a majority of parents are feeling, in solidarity, because they also have, children in boarding schools, and they feel bothered in one way or another.
Okay, let me briefly show you what provisions we have in terms of health standards in schools, and of course what health checklist each school should be taking a look at as they admit students every term. These are from a 2008 report titled The Safety Standards Manual for Schools in Kenya 2008. Schools must conduct regular medical checkups for learners, have an adequately trained teacher in health education. This is in every school. In addition, boarding schools, and this is on the next slide, should have sick bays equipped with first-line treatment drugs and ensure working in adequate first aid kit and facilities to provide emergency care in schools. That's a little bit about what sort of guidelines or provisions school teachers or administrators have. In addition, this is what each school should have in terms of a health checklist. A school should regularly check whether a learner is able to carry out routine learning activities. Some of the questions they should be asking themselves is he or she able to participate regularly in the school curriculum? Whether a learner has frequent illness or accidents that are typical of his or her age, sex group, whether a learner is interested and enthusiastic about most activities. Amos, let me come back to you. Those are provisions, those are guidelines, which I guess you could say are optional. Do we have anything in terms of law about what a school should do should a child report that they're not feeling well?
No, actually, there is no provision in terms of legal provisions as far as health issues are supposed to be addressed. So the very first document to ever address some of these safety issues is just the document that you've highlighted. And therefore, schools are left at liberty, number one, in terms of how much they charge in terms of healthcare. Is until this year that the national government pledged that it was going to enlist all the learners in the schools to the National Health Insurance Fund.
Do we know if that is still a pledge? Because I know President Uhuru Kenyatta in December directed that all 3 million secondary school students should be enrolled.
Yes, should actually be enrolled. And you see, this is supposed to go hand in hand with the PIN rollout that is taking place. So definitely you expect that it's going to take quite some time before you're really sure that you've enrolled all the children. So largely what you will see, private schools are doing much better than public schools, definitely as you expect, because public schools will have very, very bare minimums, very, very basic just in terms of maybe having a provision, maybe for a school nurse. But you see, for some of these schools which are very, very big, remember capitation, which is pegged on also how much you're able to pay the salaries for the non-teaching staff,
okay,
and some of the constraints that schools have. So in most cases, it becomes therefore a shared responsibility that schools will only be able to administer like the first aid component,
okay,
but as soon as the situation becomes difficult, then it now becomes a responsibility of the parent. But what has happened in Alliance, I think it requires some level of interrogation. Okay,
and again, we want to say for the benefit of those watching that we still don't have the full extent of details of what actually happens. We're not passing the blame on anyone. We're just discussing what should be done. And that was actually what I was coming to ask you about, Janet. In your view, what should be the procedure when a child complains that they are not feeling well? At what point should that complaint be taken to the parent or the guardian?
I think the management of the schools, and we have to give it up, because especially looking at the case at this point is a Form 3 boy, and meaning that they've been in the school for quite a while, and somebody can actually be able to confirm that the care has been at least above average, especially now we are talking about Alliance High School. But then is also the other challenge of that, tragedy does happen. And even with utmost care, a lot of things are bound to happen. And I think that the ball still goes back to the Board of Management, like in terms of how they set up the guidelines. How, in the event that probably a child complains about sickness, at what level does the parent then get involved? Of course, I know as parents they would want full disclosure, but then there is this time that the teachers are themselves torn in between. Do we first administer, first aid to a level at which we satisfy ourselves that this is beyond us, so that we do not want to open up so many chances of children. Learners would also want to keep going home for every other, reason. So it's a tricky balance that the teachers really have to get to do in school.
In this case, I think the young man reported that he was unwell on Monday.
Yes.
Full tests, I think, were done on Wednesday, and I'm not quite sure in terms of when tuberculosis was diagnosed, but the parents received that call Thursday going on into Friday.
Yeah, there's again the limitation that he cites, because it depends with what kinds of hospitals are we, exposing ourselves into, because then the provision of medical care, within the school is only limited to the capacity of the hospitals that are near you, or the hospitals that the school will always, recommend for referral. But, the system is as open as if parents have medical cover, then their children can always, be taken care of by the medical cover. There's also the question of how well, county governments are equipping the local dispensaries and the hospitals, because that is usually the first point. When first aid is administered in schools and probably there is need for referral, then they are taken to the next facility. So if that next facility is not well equipped, then it complicates, the situation, for the school altogether.
Okay, Amos, we've had situations in the past where students complain, whether it's about bullying, about overcrowding, and their complaints are not taken seriously because I guess there's still an attitude that, and it's something that she referenced, that we have seen situations where children want to go home early, they don't want to be in school, etc. A change of attitude. And again, we are not saying that's what happened in this case, but is there a need for that? Are children's complaints taken more seriously in this day and age, in your view?
I think we've got very, very limited data specifically, and this could be cited as specific cases, because usually a lot of our schools are doing fantastic work, to be very, very sincere. But it's just that sometimes we do not have the exact details and the exact numbers of what specifically takes place. But I think there's been a serious attempt even from the part of the government in terms of ensuring that students' voices are heard. And that's the reason why even the Basic Education Act provides for student representation in the school board of management, so that the student voice is always felt when decisions are being made. So I think it's a critical point that we need to build on to that, because we're dealing, of course, with the teenagers, we're dealing with the youngsters, of course, who have a lot of energy, who have a lot of interest. So this just ought to be a level of doing, a delicate balancing act between being able really to tell what are the really genuine cases vis-a-vis what will just be the cases of truancy. Okay. So I think that all that we really need to do is just to continue facilitating the teachers, building their capacities, and opening up schools whereby there's a lot of communication that is taking place, particularly this horizontal kind of communication, and the bottom up as really opposed to just students receiving instructions from the above.
Okay, Janet, finally for you, what do you hope to see in terms of...
I really needed to make an input, especially because there's some data that is really important, but oftentimes, parents don't put it out, especially because something that, for example, if you'd register your child is probably suffering from a particular disease, then you'd be barred from accessing that school. So you find that sometimes parents withhold some information that is very, very critical even to support the school in the manner in which they want to deal with your child. So let parents be encouraged to really, make disclosures so that the school is also, ably prepared to deal with your child. But also, I'm really excited about the plan by government to open up the NHIF, to learners, because it will really ease up the pressure for the schools, especially.
How far along is that plan?
I'm sure probably...
in Nairobi County, for example?
In Nairobi County, the most that we can do, and I'm sure that is something that we can be able to assure, we're putting in place measures to ensure that there's a lot of accountability in terms of the procurement of drugs and the actual system, to ensure that the drugs actually hit, the patient. So that is something that we are going to do. And we can almost assure our Nairobi citizens that we are going to have drugs in our dispensaries, and that will ease a lot of pressure, especially for schools.
But is there any Nairobi student at the moment with NHIF cover? At the moment?
At the moment, no. But I know the process is being rolled out, and that is what he said, according to the data that the Ministry of Education is gathering at the moment, that is in the rollout. Okay.
Well, we'll just have to wait and see. We'll be waiting for a reaction from the school, a full reaction from the school as well. But our condolences to the family and friends once again of that young student who lost their life just yesterday. And Janet Muthoni Ouko, CEC Education Nairobi, Amos Kaburu, Education Expert to Aweza East Africa. Thank you for finding time to be here with us today.